All right, guys, we are going to be reacting to Growing Up Black in Germany, Esther Anumu Fordham. We're going to react to this. It's a long video, but I'm going to only react to a little bit that was recommended to me. Jump in.
So,
Make sure you guys subscribe.
Did your mother react to the news?
well, I seen such a change in my mother after that, after that, because she kept saying after all these years, you work so hard and my mother was always a little bit sophisticated. And so, that was it, to see my mother in pants, and all dirty, this I never seen before. So she said, well, this is it, this is it. And I could see the change. It seems like my mother got gray overnight. And
Did your family or your family or yourself have a kind of sense that the Germans were the bad ones in this war? I mean, or did that not really enter into things, or what? I mean,
the Germans, no,
I
not,
mean,
no, not for me, I don't know.
I mean, how did you feel about the Allies bombing your city?
Well, it was terrible. I mean, it was awful. Everybody was talking about the Tommy. They call it the Tommy, the British.
Yeah.
They call it the Tommy and the Ami and Tommy.
But you didn't necessarily, you or your family, see the Germans as the aggressors and the bad guys.
No, not. It was just that the war was on. I mean, they were fighting, and it was terrible to being there a victim. And then I remember that people were coming, the German soldiers were coming home on leave, and yeah, there was a guy. He lived in our building, and he said, I'd rather be on the front line than being in the city, than being home and just waiting for death. I can't defend myself with a gun or anything. I just have to sit here and wait for death. So they said, well, we are worse off. They sent us home for leave and look for their family. A lot of children, a lot of people were being killed. But
Damn.
they said that, what can we do?
But you folks, I mean, your family and everything were pretty well Germanized then. I mean, in a sense,
Yeah, very much so.
I mean, doesn't sound like anybody was very political or anything.
No,
I mean, you had these Jewish friends who were put out of business, so to speak, and
right.
put away into whatever. I mean, if they were they called concentration camps? I mean, and what did that mean to you? And it, but yet, it still
It was-
still within you. It still didn't make you think that I'm on the wrong side here or anything like that. I mean,
Well, in one way it was. It just all depends on how you took it, because what could you do? You couldn't fight, you couldn't say anything, and I mean,
but,
sometimes.
was that really in your mind or what?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe this is the way I am. My sisters were a little different. You just accept things as they are. I couldn't do anything about it. And I just you go into the store. I mean, I wasn't like like this. I was just whispering it. There was sometime you go into the store, you had to say Heil Hitler. You know,
To who?
to the storekeeper.
Uh-huh.
And he had the big sign outside his store. Anybody who enters has to say Heil Hitler.
Wow.
That was our milk, where you buy milk and cheese.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, milkman. And he was, I mean, he was a real Nazi.
Yeah.
So my mother, they were people, some Germans were, you just had to be, my mother would say, oh, that guy over there, he's a big Nazi, you better not say anything, And then you could say this store, they say, oh, they are okay, They just go along with it. But some of them would say, don't you say Heil Hitler, you don't come into my store if you don't say Heil Hitler. So that's the way. So it was like, some were like on one side and the other one say, well, what can I do? I don't want to go into jail.
Well, they have to go along with it. I mean, the truth is that they have to go along with it, because at that moment, if you don't go along with it, the consequences were almost dead.
I don't believe what he's doing. I'm against him, maybe after it's all over and Hitler win, I'm going to go, go into the concentration
Who
camp.
would say this?
Some Germans,
Yeah.
See, it wasn't only the Jewish people they were after. Many Germans were put away. And my brother-in-law, he was an anthroposophist. One time they came to his ship, then they confiscated all Rudolf Steiner books, took them away. So,
You were a teenager in high school at this point, right?
yeah, right.
Do you remember how history was being taught at that point? Were you being indoctrinated in your classes in any way? I mean, about what was going on, or?
No, well, they mostly was it was also taught about Hitler, but everything is good, and but it all the some of them. I did go to a private school for as long as I could. My mother put me after I left this teacher, I went to other private. I went to a Lutheran school, so there the teaching was completely different.
Somewhat more liberal? Or?
Yeah, it was more, and it was also on a religious basis, and they were
So at least with that being said, that probably gave her some protection.
teaching. So it was not like in a public school.
But
they even
didn't they have to teach some kind of curriculum that was how it reflected on the current government?
Yeah, not in the private school,
really?
Not in the no, but the public school they did. Yeah, in the public schools.
So how did the war end for you guys? What was it like?
When we came, after we had lost everything, we just...
You know what? I will have to say, I saw the movie that you guys recommended to me, the one, I forgot, The Downfall. The scene, I saw the scene where they start attacking Berlin, and they start throwing all the papers, all the books, all the records to the fire in the middle of the building. And all of a sudden they're trying to escape, and there's a scene where there's a guy without an arm, and he wanted to go towards his son. Happens to be his son was a soldier, but he's only like 10, 11 years old. Shit, man. And he's telling the soldier, hey, I want my son back. And the soldier is telling the dad, you should be proud of your son, because he just destroyed 2 tanks. But the little kid looks like, bro, like, I don't know. I cannot imagine living in a place like that, bro. During that time is put things into perspective, man. I saw that scene as a father myself. If I see my son doing stuff like that, and he's just gone, knowing that the country's gonna fall. Oh, it has to be one of the worst feelings, man.
There was... Where were we gonna go? We didn't have no. Some people, Germans, had little summer cottages where they could go to, but we didn't have it. So we had friends in East Germany, Thüringen, and that's where we went.
That's the name of the town?
Thüringen, that's in East Germany, Thüringen. And in Mühlhausen, the town was Mühlhausen. So we stayed there. Now this is just my mother and I. My sister's already there somewhere on the other end there in Bavaria.
Were you in touch with them at all?
Later on. So we stayed there, and then, people, it was very strange, when you come into the places, the town, even Bavaria, where people didn't even know what was going on. They had their homes, everything was nice and clean and tidy and beautiful, polished. And here come the people who, all dirty, bombed out. So nobody wanted them, And they would look down on them and they say, here comes the bombed out people. Not in my house,
Were the authorities kind of telling these folks, though, that they were supposed to take these refugees in?
Yes, yeah. And then, but there was one thing I have to talk about is my sister, my mother, my sister and her baby, and my other sister. So my oldest sister, my youngest sister. So nobody wanted to take them. They needed a place to stay. And they went to the authorities, they give people to stay. And then that was it was kind of a dramatic experience. I don't know, for some reason.
Damn, just
I
imagine
don't know
that,
whether
Rona.
because they were
Like
black.
you need somewhere to stay. You need some refuge, and nobody want to take it, man. Like, yes,
Lack of
I'm
work,
telling you
but
this.
anyways, they just didn't. They had a hard time, and then they found a nice. Then finally, there was a professor. He had a big house, and just him and the housekeeper, and he said, I will take them. So that's where they lived.
How long did it take them to find the place?
I don't know. That I don't remember. But I remember my sister said they really were, you know, some of the people, they probably said we're here, and then the people would say no, you know. So it was like, not like, it wasn't so much the color, I believe, but people don't know, you know, and especially in South Germany, it's very, very different. They're completely different mentality.
In what way? What would you say?
Uh,
More provincial, or what?
more clannish, you know. If we don't know anything, if we don't know you, if you come from a different town, I don't want you in my house, you know.
Country folk.
Right, I don't know anything about you. And, you know, I think it was more or less that than the color, you know. Because they made wonderful friends later on, and they really went all out. And my sister lived there for 10 years, my younger sister.
So what happened to you and your mother?
So we went to Turing, and then we stayed there for a while
With who now?
with friends.
Okay.
These were the people I
It's
never
funny
met
how you
them.
say it, with friends. You heard that? With friends.
With who now?
With friends.
Okay.
These were the people I never met
Huh.
them, but they were Germans.
Mhm.
And we stayed there for about couple of months.
Where exactly did you stay in their house?
I slept on the couch. My mother, we slept in the living room. They gave up their living room to us. So they didn't have a very big apartment. I remember that. You know, they just, they didn't have a house. Like my sister, they had it, you know, the man gave up his, you know, not the whole house, but he
Do you know what
gave
they
them
did for a
nice.
living?
Oh, the people?
Mhm.
I think he was a retired businessman.
Mm.
Yeah, he was. No. He was a tailor. He was a tailor, but he was retired.
And he was just a friend of your mother's?
Yeah, he was just a friend of ours.
He knew her
And
from
his wife.
Hamburg, or
No, they know her. They know them through my mother's friend. So so we stayed there, and it wasn't you know. You can imagine you come in and you're all dirty. I had boots on, you know, riding boots. I couldn't get them off
why?
because my feet were I was in the train for days and days.
So they were swollen?
They were so swollen. They were so swollen.
That's sad.
I remember we had this duffel bag, and we were on the train to nowhere, and I just went to sleep. And my mother kept calling me. She said, "How can you sleep? How can you sleep?" I said, "I
Ugh.
can't sleep. I was just so exhausted." And you're dirty. Can you imagine? For weeks and weeks, you can't take a bath and nothing.
Yeah, and you might have to feel so bad about yourself at that point because you're exhausted. You're not getting like a refresh. Ah,
And my boots, when we got there, I don't know
So
how
you
I.
were about
damn,
18
man.
at this point.
Yeah, I don't know how I got them off. So, anyways, we stayed there, and then my mother decided. My mother said, if I have to live in a chicken coop, and call it my own. I don't want to live with, you know, being a guest. You know, you are just only, how do you say it? Just a guest. They want you, you know, but not really.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
everything is
Mm-hmm.
inconvenient. You know, what they did. They did do the best they could. I mean, they gave up their couch. They gave up, you know, and shared everything with you. You
So what
know.
happened next?
And then we went back to Hamburg.
Mm-hmm.
We went back to Hamburg.
Was the bombing still going on, or were we talking about
No,
the
that
end of
was
the war
all
now, or-
over. It was all, everything was, you know,
So this is post-war.
the war was still going on, but people just went back and some people went back actually to their place where they had lived and lived in the basement underneath it. They dug themselves out, and that's what we did.
Yeah.
That's what these
In your apartment building?
stone by stone. No, we went to another area, not there,
I see.
not there.
That's funny.
Stone by stone,
So you just dug yourself out a hole?
and out of a hole. But that was another area. It was also an apartment, and
Did somebody say, you can live here? Or did you just do it, or what?
I don't even know what. I don't know whether you had to have a permit. I think people just did it.
So how did you feed yourself through all this?
Oh, well, they always gave ration. And it's a funny
Ah.
thing, when they did the bombing in 1943, all of a sudden, you know, to keep the people, keep the peace, keep them, you know, as insane. I mean, so they
That
gave,
is so interesting.
they said, oh, you get butter, you know, butter was very scarce. And all of a sudden, everything was there, you know. You could eat well, and I mean, you had more than you normally have.
So basically, what you do is it's a false sense of security, right? They give you enough for you mentally to be thinking that everything is okay.
And they just did that to just keep the people, you know.
So they wouldn't rise up? Or
Right.
Wow.
So you went back to Hamburg and dug
And-
yourself out a
Yeah,
hole?
and they give you a ration. You know, you got your ration. You always got food. You know, I mean, not much, but
That is so funny.
you always survived somehow. They always made sure everything was on ration, but you always got that wherever you went.
Well, why don't you tell me about the end of the war? What was that like?
Oh, so
Last couple of
so
days,
when
or-
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it there, man. I don't know if you guys want me to react to the entire thing. It's an hour and something. I can do like a live. If you guys want me to do a live, just put in the comment section below. Hey, do a live with it. I'll do the live with the entire documentary with you guys. But this is very interesting. It's just, again, different perspective. She's a black lady. She's a black lady living under the regime. That is so interesting. Again, it's more different perspective. A lot of different perspective. Let me know what you guys think. I would love to hear you guys' opinions. I will see you in the next one.